From controlling nearly a quarter of the planet's landmass to watching their empire crumble within just a few decades, here's how the British Empire fell. If you think the United States has too much land, just wait till you hear about the largest empire in human history. At its peak, the British Empire stretched from the USA all the way down to Antarctica, encompassing not one, not two, but 3/4 of the Earth's surface. Now that is big. So just what the heck happened? How did the British manage to acquire so much real estate? And how did they lose it so quickly? Well, let me tell you. For that, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Let's start with how the British began their imperial conquest, early colonization. When most Europeans were more concerned with who was the Pope, the British began their colonial efforts by establishing settlements in North America in the 16th century, specifically in what would become the United States. They also set up plantations in the Caribbean and started trading posts in India. But those early colonies weren't really a part of the British Empire as we know it. Most of them were initially run as colonies by private companies. For example, the earliest British colony in North America, which we now call Canada, was established in 1535. But it wasn't incorporated into the British Empire until 1763, after the 7 Years' War. You see, those initial colonies were far from profitable. That's where the British East India Company comes in, the most powerful and influential trading company in history. This company was given a monopoly on trade between Britain and Asia. It also had the right to make war, mint coins, establish courts, and even imprison people. With the help of some local allies, the British East India Company grew to dominate many parts of India. Its greatest extent, it controlled most of India, as well as large parts of Southeast Asia. And that came in handy because when European powers began colonizing Africa and Asia in the late 1800s, Britain already had a head start there. But how did the British manage to conquer and hold on to all this land? Well, part of the answer lies on the seas. In the 17th century, Britain built up a formidable navy that allowed them to project power across the globe. The Royal Navy grew rapidly during the 18th century, becoming the dominant naval power in Europe by the end of the century. This naval supremacy enabled the British to transport troops and resources around the world, suppress rebellions in their colonies, and fight wars against other colonial powers. Industrialization. The Industrial Revolution started in Britain in the late 18th century and would go on to transform the nation into the dominant economic power in the world. This gave Britain the wealth and resources necessary to fund its empire, which at the time consisted of North America, Caribbean, large parts of India, as well as a number of minor territories. The British government imposed strict laws to prevent other European powers from encroaching on their territory. And if any of you are wondering, no, Britain didn't own all of the land that we today associate with the United Kingdom. Scotland and Ireland were separate kingdoms. Wales was ruled by the English crown. But the two entities were not formally incorporated into the United Kingdom until much later. During the 18th century, the British Empire expanded rapidly, seizing key territories in North America, the Caribbean, and India. After winning the 7 Years' War against France, Britain emerged as the world's dominant colonial power. They gained control of Canada, large parts of the USA, the Caribbean, and India. Despite losing the American colonies in the American Revolutionary War, Britain's empire continued to grow rapidly throughout the 19th century. This period, known as the Scramble for Africa, saw European powers race to colonize the continent. Britain acquired South Africa, the Suez Canal, and large parts of East Africa. They also colonized Australia and New Zealand. Meanwhile, back in India, things got a little spicy. In 1857, a rebellion broke out against the British East India Company. It started after rumors spread that the cartridges used in the new Enfield rifle were greased with the fat of cows and pigs, which was offensive to both Hindus and Muslims. The rebellion spread quickly, and soon large parts of northern and central India were in open revolt. Although the rebellion was eventually crushed, it had a profound impact on how the British ruled their empire. As a result of the uprising, the British East India Company was dissolved, and the British Crown took direct control of India. This new entity became known as the British Raj. Apart from the Indian Rebellion of 1857, The British also faced other conflicts while expanding their empire. They fought several wars against the Zulu Kingdom in South Africa, including the Anglo-Zulu War of 1879, in which a small British force managed to defeat a much larger Zulu army. The Boers, descendants of Dutch settlers in South Africa, also presented a challenge to British rule, leading to the Boer Wars from 1899 to 1902. Despite these conflicts, the British continued to expand their empire throughout the 19th century, driven by economic, political, and strategic motives. By the turn of the century, the British Empire encompassed a quarter of the Earth's landmass and was home to a quarter of the world's population. Now let's fast forward to the early 20th century, when the British Empire reached its peak. At the beginning of the 20th century, the British Empire was at the height of its power. It included vast territories in Africa, Asia, and Oceania, as well as significant holdings in North America and the Caribbean. The empire spanned over 13.7 million square miles, making it the largest in history. At its peak, the British Empire controlled approximately 22% of the Earth's land surface and was home to about 22% of the world's population. However, the outbreak of World War I in 1914 would have a profound impact on the empire's trajectory. While Britain's military forces played a crucial role in winning the war, the conflict resulted in substantial financial strain and loss of life. Moreover, the participation in World War I contributed to the weakening of Britain's relative position as a global power. Britain's dominance in trade and industry began to decline as other nations like the USA and Germany emerged as stronger economic competitors. But it wasn't only the economy. During the war, soldiers from Britain's colonies fought alongside their imperial counterparts, gaining valuable combat experience and a sense of unity. Many of them had been encouraged to join the war effort with promises of greater rights and representation upon their return home. However, those promises were often not fulfilled, leading to growing discontent among colonial populations. Another factor contributing to the decline of the British Empire was the rise of nationalism in colonies. As the 19th century progressed, colonized peoples began to resent the limitations placed on their freedom and the exploitation of their resources. Leaders like Mahatma Gandhi in India mobilized their fellow citizens to demand independence and self-determination. Despite these challenges, the empire endured for several more decades. After World War I, Britain attempted to reassert its dominance by pursuing a policy of appeasement towards Germany in the lead-up to World War II. However, this policy proved unsuccessful, and Britain found itself embroiled in another global conflict. World War II was devastating for Britain. Their financial resources were drained and their military suffered significant losses. While the United Kingdom itself was never fully occupied by a foreign power, the strain of the war effort led to increased calls for independence from the empire's colonies. Under pressure from both internal and external factors, the British began to decolonize. In 1947, India and Pakistan gained independence. During the 1950s and 1960s, African colonies also won their freedom, such as Ghana in 1957, Nigeria in 1960, and Kenya in 1963. The Caribbean islands began to gain independence throughout the 1960s, with Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago, Barbados and Guyana becoming republics by the end of the decade. The last major British territories to gain independence were in Asia, with Singapore achieving it in 1965 and Hong Kong in 1997. Factors contributing to the fall? There were several key factors that caused the British Empire to fall apart so quickly once the process started. The first was World War II, which had left Britain financially exhausted and with a weakened military. This made it difficult for them to maintain control over their vast empire. Secondly, the increasing pressure to decolonize due to the rise of nationalism in colonies made it clear that trying to hold on to their empire would not be sustainable in the long term. Additionally, international organizations like the UN pushed for decolonization. While the USA, who had emerged as a superpower after World War II, took a strong stance against colonialism, putting pressure on Britain to release their colonies, finally, the British simply ran out of money. Maintaining such a huge empire was expensive, and with their economy already strained from the war, they could no longer afford to keep it. So does the British Empire still live on in today's world? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching.